Okay. Good. Welcome, everybody. It's not that comfortable as upstairs was, and not only for the reason that we cannot sit down on something so nice as your sort of memorial, but also because I have all kinds of videos around which are loud, and some of them have some soundtrack which can really drive you mad. So if you listen it more than 15 minutes, really you are getting yeah, quite aggressive. And I thought to say a few words at the very beginning on actually how this whole project was started, and then to speak a bit about why it started, and then to give you a kind of structural yeah, kind of help in how to read eventually the whole show. So in relation to the question how it started, it was back in 2012 that a curator who was called Esther Steyerhofer invited me to take part in a show which was about zoo architecture. And we worked before together, so we were in good working conditions. But then I said, Esther, I'm very pleased that you invited me, and it's great, but I have nothing to do neither with zoos and neither with architecture. So what can I add to this? And she said, well, you will see. You just take your time and make some research, and maybe you find something. And the reason she approached me with this question was because I'm coming from, I was born in Transylvania, which is a former Hungarian territory, and there was a famous Transylvanian architect whose name was Khaled, who designed a major part of the buildings which is to be found in the Budapest Zoo. And Esther thought that maybe I can dig out something of this story. And I thought that I will never take part in this show. But I thought, okay, nevertheless, let's try to kind of check what's the situation with that. And as I started the research, I came across some very interesting issues, which kind of get me very excited about the whole story. And actually, that kind of process led to the production of the first video, which you can see on the left side in this smaller room. And that is actually, it is one part of this trilogy, because the whole show, it is called Hungarian Trilogy, from Fake Mountains to Fate. That's the title of the whole trilogy. And actually the very interesting topic that I came across while researching back in 2012 on this issue of zoo architecture was that in the Budapest Zoo there is a fake rock which was modeled after a certain mountain which is to be found in Transylvania. And I find this very interesting because the Hungarian history has actually two major events which are both considered traumatic events by different groups or memory collectives. And one of them is the Trianon Treaty, which is it's somehow similar to the Versailles Treaty's effect on German history. But I would say it is more dramatic because yeah, more than 2/3 of the territory of former Hungary was kind of detached from the country. And as this nice mountain, which is in Transylvania, was also detached, so therefore they built up a kind of model or a fake of it within the Budapest Zoo. And actually that somehow led to the production of this first piece. And before I go into details on what the other pieces are about, maybe just a few words about why I became interested in this whole topic, besides the fact that I was invited to take part in that show. It was also a motivation which came for me at around 2011, 2012. Which was somehow so I had somehow this feeling that I will need to work somehow with more with local issues. Before, my art was very conceptual, very neutral, and I might say even formal to some extent. I was doing media installations, but very conceptual ones and very neutral pieces. And I had a good after a while I started to feel myself quite bad in Hungary, where I am kind of immigrant. So I've been living in Hungary for the last 20 and something years. Before, I lived in Romania. Actually, it is almost half and half of my life that I spent in these two countries. And so I felt quite bad because of how the whole political atmosphere was kind of changing. So I wanted to leave because I never felt myself really at home in Hungary. And then I met an old friend who is a Japanese media curator, scholar, who was visiting Budapest, and we met, and she was asking, okay, how are you doing? And I said, well, I want to leave this shitty country. And then she said, well, you shouldn't leave. And then I said, why? She said, because you have such a special view and perspective on this country, because of your background and so on. And she said, I'm totally convinced that the times that are coming will need your, kind of, not experience, but your perspective and your kind of knowledge on this. And then somehow a kind of change occurred in my artistic practice, and that was the first piece I produced from this new perspective. But then the situation got so bad that I kind of gave up art for a few years, and I started to mostly to work in kind of activist field. I wouldn't go into details of that, but it took like almost 3 years. It took 3 years from my life, and it was a very intense period. I enjoyed it very much, but there was no art in between, or I don't know whether it was art what we were doing. We were organizing kind of art, like I was part and initiator of a self-organized artist group. We were doing political interventions, public interventions, protests with police, with everything. We were taken to the police, to penitentiaries, and so on and so forth. And that went on for 3 years. And then this grant came. From Edith-Russ-Haus and from Lower Saxony. And then I thought that, okay, I would need to finish this project, which I started in 2012. And in this way, actually, the two other kind of parts of the project were completed, which I even initially I kind of considered to complete them into a trilogy. And kind of coming back on the particular show and its structure, so it has kind of 3 parts. That's the first part, which is called Immerse Geography. That is the kind of fake mountain story and the zoo story. And maybe I wouldn't say so much about the piece. It is a video piece, it's a docufiction, as well as the other video piece, and basically also this installation is a kind of docufiction. So the docufiction as a format kind of ties together the 3 parts of the show. And it's a 16 minutes long docufiction, and it mostly speaks about about how the political will transforms the geography, and in what ways, well, in particular in Hungary, but to some extent also in European global level. Because the story is about the zoo in Budapest and this mountain, the fake mountain which was built there, and I researched a lot, and I found out that actually it's not the only fake mountain. So all around Europe there are many fake mountains in zoos. And actually the medium as such, like the fake mountain, was kind of developed by a person called Hagenbeck, who was one of the first merchants who would bring exotic animals in Europe. And after a while he designed this fake mountain, which looked very natural, and the animals could be shown in their as they would live in their natural habitat. And he also was the guy who actually started after a while to bring, instead of exotic animals, to bring people, and he actually initiated this format of human exhibits, the Völkerschau, actually, which was quite popular in Europe, and actually the last situation in which you could see black people or indigenous people in the zoos was in 1957 in Brussels, which is quite an interesting kind of reference as if you think about the European Union. And so my story, it is about the fact that during the interwar time there might be an attempt of bringing Transylvanian families into the Budapest Zoo. Because of the Trianon Treaty, as many Hungarians were shut out of the country, and the leader of those times, who was called Admiral Horthy, had this brilliant idea to bring them there. And yeah, so that's the story. You should watch it at some point if you have time, and maybe I wouldn't say more about that. And then I started, with the help of this grant, I started to work on the second and third part of the show. The second one was partly, or not partly, ready. It was a pilot version of a video which I already produced in 2014 maybe, but it was not completed at all. And so the video, it tries to analyze actually how the political symbols are created, especially in the Hungarian context, and actually how these symbols would transform the way of thinking of people, and what kind of historical references one can find to specific Hungarian political symbols. Most of all, the one which is a bird. It is a totem bird of the pre-Christian Hungarians. It is called Turul bird. It is very popular nowadays. It is a real renaissance of its cult. Many monuments are erected, so it became the kind of the symbol of a new nationalism, even though it was there for hundreds of years, even 1,000 years. And it is a very controversial symbol. There are very debates and argues around it. In many cases, there are monuments dedicated to the Turul bird, which are opposed by various political groups. Even right now there is one in a smaller city called Szentendre, which goes on quite a heavy debate. The people would even fight with each other because of that. Some people wouldn't like to see it, some others would love to see it, and so on and so forth. So I tried to somehow dig into the history and into the relevance of how this symbol works, and what is the kind of real kind of underlying kind of importance or significance of it. especially because one of the, let's say, not the biggest one, but the most important, one of the most important Turul kind of monument was erected a few years ago, and it was inaugurated by our Prime Minister, and he held a very, very weird speech there. And actually, I took a quote from that speech, which actually that's the point where the whole kind of video sort of directs itself. So that's the end of the video. And in this quote, actually, the Prime Minister said that the Turul is a symbol. It is a symbol in which we are born. So it is about a concept of nation, which is exclusive in the sense that you have to be born into that nation. That's the basics. And on the top, he also added that actually this symbol kind of ties us to the blood and motherland. So like it's the Blutenboden ideology, and so that's the story of the second video, which also applies this technique of docufiction. So the majority of the topics I'm kind of dealing with and of the references I'm using are kind of checked historical references and events. But for sure, there is a slight modification of the various kind of time to time dates or connections in between the things. So it's a special technique. Someone yesterday was asking, why do I believe that an artist has the right to transform the history? And I said, actually, well, the history is something we are, all of us, we are transforming it in some ways. For sure, even the historians themselves are arguing, and they are kind of working together on, creating a consensual history. But at the same time, beyond the academic historical circles, you have various other circles of non-academic historians who would also kind of contribute to the construction of history and of a collective memory. And therefore, I think an artist has the same legitimacy to kind of approach it, and well, time to time he or she might have some special look on it. As I state in all cases that these are docufictions, usually I would leave up to the viewers to decide whether they believe what they see or not. So there is no, like the true and the fictitious parts are not marked or separated, because that would make too easy to understand them, I think. And so that's about 19 minutes long video, and I invite you to watch it if you have time, maybe after the talk. And the third part of in the third part of this show, I wanted to deal, following the political geography and the political symbolism. I wanted to deal with the politics as fate, especially because in the following the system change in Hungary in '89, a gradual kind of growing of the number of those who would be keen of some kind of neo-pagan kind of approach was growing, and it was gradually growing, but in the last maybe 10 years this growth took a different speed and level. So by now it became a very, very popular kind of topic to deal with neo-paganism. From this point of view, actually, Hungary is not unique. There were even in Budapest there was a wonderful show dealing and comparing the similar kind of processes in post-socialist countries. So in many of the post-socialist countries, It happened the same in Poland. There is a very strong neo-pagan kind of movement in Russia, in all the Slavic countries, in almost all of them, in Baltic countries, so everywhere. But it happens to have also to be also in Hungary. And so in this particular situation or chapter, I wanted to somehow approach and to analyze what political religion, what the nation religion and the kind of political religion or faith might mean. And at the very beginning I had the intention to create a video as for the third part of the trilogy, but then somehow I decided to work with objects. And at the very beginning I was thinking about a few objects. A few months ago we discussed with Edith the topic, and well, I said maybe I will have a few objects in the show. But then I somehow started to collect them, and as collecting is a is a vice. In fact, you can hardly stop when you start. I ended up in having, I don't know, almost 100 objects and various, I don't know, kind of references and so on. So it just grew and grew and grew. And my kind of working method was that we have in Hungary a kind of online kind of thing, which is it is pretty much like eBay, but it's a Hungarian one. And that's where you can usually find whatever you want, but there is a huge kind of interest and exchange of the so-called irredentist objects, which are objects from the interwar period and very popular nowadays, and many collectors would like to have them. Which are part of the interwar ideology of the interwar Hungarian ideology, which was about claiming back the lost land, in short. Okay, and so then I started to collect these objects, and time to time the objects that I found led me to some new kind of ideas and so on. So it was a very interesting process, which I was very happy to be in. And and finally I had to somehow kind of arrange them, and I had to kind of decide in what way to show them, and finally we got to the conclusion that maybe a kind of museum-like situation would be a proper, would serve as a proper presentation for these objects. And actually, as the objects are kind of placed, they have a certain logic on which I worked quite a lot. So there are various chapters which are marked by by some inscriptions on the wall, and for sure there is a fiction around where this archaeological found has been found. And that's a place in Hungary which is called Pilis Mountain. It is quite close to Budapest. The mountain is a very important kind of topic in Hungarian kind of national identity discourse, because of the fact that, following the Trianon Treaty, actually many or almost all of the mountainous regions around, I mean, of the former Greater Hungary were kind of detached from the country. And by now they would be found in, I don't know, in Slovakia and Ukraine and Romania and, mostly in these countries. And so the mountain, it's like, it's a very nostalgic, topic for the Hungarians. And that's why also the first video deals with this nostalgia towards the mountains. And there is this mountain which is called Pilis Mountain, which is, it's not the highest which was left in Hungary, but is the most important. It is the closest to the capital, and it also has all kinds of speculative theories of what might have happened there. So it is considered a sacred mountain, a holy mountain, and according to some, even the main heart chakra of the whole world is to be found there. And for sure, it's on the axis and of the main world directions, and also astral things, and so everything comes together there. And but what I was more interested was not this highly speculative sort of importance which is given to this mountain, but rather the fact that within the Pilis mountain somehow there is a very syncretic kind of composition of some kind of Christian and some kind of pagan sort of popular religion. And actually that's what at this very moment constitutes the main, I would say, ideological sort of background for, mostly for the nationalist circles, and mostly for those circles which would work on the reconstruction of the whole redesigning and reconstruction of the Hungarian national identity, which is a many multifaceted process, and for sure it positions itself against the West always. And that's the reason that in my kind of fiction, actually these two finds were found on two sides of a huge ditch, which is there's a good English word which is the title of the, it is chasm, like it's the it's deeper than the ditch, but smaller than a valley. And so the finds were found on two sides of this. So we have a western source and an eastern source. And so once we go in and see the mainly how the objects are arranged, you will maybe understand. So on the left side you will see like these kind of boxes, and in which these finds were found in the Pilis mountain, which is a sacred mountain, and where many kind of fringe and alternative archaeologists would work and would make diggings and so on. They would look for the sacred, I don't know, coffin of some old kings and so on. So it's there's a lots of interest in it. And then I got all these objects together, and I got the kind of main construct in how to place them. And then I somehow decided to have two layers. So one layer is, let's say, a more kind of conceptual one, which starts from that very first vitrine over there and ends here at the end. And actually that is the line that's more like the historical line, which is traced from Herder, Johann Gottfried Herder, who at some point at the end of the 18th century, he happened to mention in one of his writings that he feels that the Hungarians will disappear in a few years or in a few decades or centuries, because they are somehow in between huge kind of Germanic and Slavic sort of peoples, and therefore they have no chance to survive. And actually, this sentence by Herder was very influential on the Hungarian literature and history and the intellectual kind of thinking. So at the beginning of the 19th century, and starting from the Romanticism actually, but also including the first part of the 19th century and even the second part of it, like many literary works has been written kind of dealing with this topic of the nation disappears, and what happens if the nation disappears, and the death of the nation. That's a recurrent kind of topic in Hungarian national thinking. Even in the official Hungarian national anthem, it is included, which is written by a poet, a romantic poet, and for sure who was again pretty much influenced by this Herderian kind of thought. So it starts from there, and it ends somehow at the end of the Second World War, where actually the new kind of the new hopes of getting back this, or the hopes of getting back those lands and so on, which kind of led actually Hungary into the Second World War and into all the horror that happened, and into getting rid of its own like more than 400,000 of its own citizens by killing them, deporting them, and killing them, and so on. So all this kind of attempt of getting it back collapsed again, and actually nothing happened. Like they didn't achieve what they want, and therefore somehow that's the end of the story. And for sure, in the meantime, like the temporary, the objects would time to time speak about the present, speak about the past, so they would jump from each other, from in between these different kind of time zones. And they are deliberately, time to time, created or presented in a way that it is clear that something is fake. In other cases, it's not that clear. Okay, so this is the kind of conceptual starting and end point of the show, and there is a narrative line in it, which is it is at the same. It has the same importance, I would say. Which starts from a postcard I bought again on this eBay-like site, and this postcard was sent the very following just a few weeks after the Trianon Treaty, and it was sent by a person called Tamás, which is the Thomas for like Hungarian for Thomas, and it was sent to a Jewish girl in the Hungarian countryside, and it's not very relevant what he writes in this postcard on this postcard, but somehow at the end he has this kind of open question like, I hope we won't be resentful to each other. And the postcard itself displays a very dramatic drawing of kind of post-Trianon drama. It is depicted on the drawing, and it has this text on the other side, like it's a drawing, and the text that just enough earth you left for us to dig our grave. And that was actually the general kind of feeling. I mean, everybody wanted to kind of kill themselves, like all the country was totally broken, and it was a very kind of traumatic, really traumatic event actually for all the citizens of the country. Okay, thank you very much then. Okay. Yeah.